René Descartes was a French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist. Dubbed the father of modern philosophy, much of subsequent Western philosophy is a response to his writings, which are studied closely to this day. He spent about 20 years of his life in the Dutch Republic. Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy continues to be a standard text at most university philosophy departments. Descartes' influence in mathematics is equally apparent. The Cartesian coordinate system, allowing reference to a point in space as a set of numbers, and allowing algebraic equations to be expressed as geometric shapes in a 2- or 3-dimensional coordinate system, was named after him. He is credited as the father of analytical geometry, the bridge between algebra and geometry, used in the discovery of infinitesimal calculus and analysis. Descartes was also one of the key figures in the scientific revolution. Descartes refused to accept the authority of previous philosophers, and refused to trust his own senses. He frequently set his views apart from those of his predecessors. In the opening section of The Passions of the Soul, a treatise on the early modern version of what are now commonly called emotions, Descartes goes so far as to assert that he will write on this topic, as if no one had written on these matters before. Many elements of his philosophy have precedence in late Aristotelianism, the revived Stoicism of the 16th century, or in earlier philosophers like Augustine. In his natural philosophy, he differs from the schools on two major points. First, he rejects the splitting of corporeal substance into matter and form. Second, he rejects any appeal to final ends, divine or natural, in explaining natural phenomena. In his theology, he insists on the absolute freedom of God's act of creation. Descartes laid the foundation for 17th-century continental rationalism, later advocated by Baruch Spinoza and Gottfried Leibniz, and opposed by the empiricist school of thought consisting of Hobbes, Locke, Berkeley, and Hume. Leibniz, Spinoza and Descartes were all well versed in mathematics as well as philosophy, and Descartes and Leibniz contributed greatly to science as well. His best-known philosophical statement is Cogito ergo sum, found in Part 4 of Discourse on the Method and 7 of Part 1 of Principles of Philosophy. Life. Early life. Descartes was born in La Haye-en-Touraine, Indre-et-Loire, France, on 31 March 1596. When he was 1 year old, his mother Jean Brocha died after trying to give birth to another child who also died. His father Joachim was a member of the Parliament of Brittany at Rennes. René lived with his grandmother and with his great-uncle. Although the Descartes family was Roman Catholic, the Poitou region was controlled by the Protestant Huguenots. In 1607, late because of his fragile health, he entered the Jesuit College Royal Henry Le Grand at La Flèche, where he was introduced to mathematics and physics, including Galileo's work. After graduation in 1614, he studied 2 years at the University of Poitiers, earning a baccalaureate and license in law, in accordance with his father's wishes that he should become a lawyer. From there he moved to Paris. In his book Discourse on the Method, Descartes recalls, "I entirely abandoned the study of letters, resolving to seek no knowledge other than that of which could be found in myself or else in the great book of the world. I spent the rest of my youth traveling, visiting courts and armies, mixing with people of diverse temperaments and ranks, gathering various experiences, testing myself in the situations which fortune offered me, and at all times reflecting upon whatever came my way so as to derive some profit from it." Given his ambition to become a professional military officer, in 1618, Descartes joined the Dutch States Army in Breda under the command of Maurice of Nassau, and undertook a formal study of military engineering, as established by Simon Stevin. Descartes therefore received much encouragement in Breda to advance his knowledge of mathematics. In this way he became acquainted with Isaac Beeckman, principal of a Dordrecht school, for whom he wrote the Compendium of Music. Together they worked on free fall, catenary, conic section and fluid statics. Both believed that it was necessary to create a method that thoroughly linked mathematics and physics. While in the service of the Duke Maximilian of Bavaria since 1619, Descartes was present at the Battle of the White Mountain outside Prague. In November 1620, he visited the labs of Tycho Brahe in Prague and Johannes Kepler in Regensburg. Visions according to Adrian Baylot. On the night of 10-11 November 1619, while stationed in Neuburg an der Donau, Descartes shut himself in a room with an oven, to escape the cold. While within, he had 3 visions and believed that a divine spirit revealed to him a new philosophy. Upon exiting, he had formulated analytical geometry and the idea of applying the mathematical method to philosophy. He concluded from these visions that the pursuit of science would prove to be, for him, the pursuit of true wisdom, an essential part of his life's work. Descartes also saw very clearly that all truths were linked with one another, so that finding a fundamental truth and proceeding with logic would open the way to all science. This basic truth Descartes found quite soon. His famous, "I think therefore I am." France in 1620, Descartes left the army. He visited Basilica della Santa Casa in Loreto, then visited various countries before returning to France, and during the next few years, spent time in Paris. It was there that he composed his first essay on method, Reguli ad directionem and genii. He arrived in La Haye in 1623, selling all of his property to invest in bonds, which provided a comfortable income for the rest of his life. Descartes was present at the siege of La Rochelle by Cardinal Richelieu in 1627. In the fall of the same year, in the residence of the papal nuncio Guy de Bagno, where he came with Masséna and many other scholars to listen to a lecture given by the alchemist Monsieur de Chandoux on the principles of a supposed new philosophy. Cardinal Berulle urged him to write an exposition of his own new philosophy. Netherlands. Descartes returned to the Dutch Republic in 1628. In April 1629 he joined the University of Franeker, studying under Metius, living either with a Catholic family, or renting the Sadi Maslot, where he invited in vain a French cook and an optician. The next year, under the name of Poitevin, he enrolled at the Leiden University to study mathematics with Jacob Golius, who confronted him with Pappus's hexagon theorem, and astronomy with Martin Hortensius. In October 1630 he had a falling out with Beekman, whom he accused of plagiarizing some of his ideas. In Amsterdam, he had a relationship with a servant girl, Helena Jans van der Stroom, with whom he had a daughter, Francine, who was born in 1635 in Deventer, at which time Descartes taught at the Utrecht University. Unlike many moralists of the time, Descartes was not devoid of passions but rather defended them. He wept upon Francine's death in 1640. Descartes said that he did not believe that one must refrain from tears to prove oneself a man. Russell Shorter postulated that the experience of fatherhood and losing a child formed a turning point in Descartes' work, changing its focus from medicine to a quest for universal answers. Despite frequent moves, he wrote all his major work during his 20-plus years in the Netherlands, where he managed to revolutionize mathematics and philosophy. In 1633, Galileo was condemned by the Catholic Church, and Descartes abandoned plans to publish treatise on the world, his work of the previous 4 years. Nevertheless, in 1637 he published part of this work in 3 essays. Les Météores, La Dioptrique and La Géométrie, preceded by an introduction, his famous Discours de la méthode. In it Descartes lays out 4 rules of thought, meant to ensure that our knowledge rests upon a firm foundation. The first was never to accept anything for true which I did not clearly know to be such, that is to say, carefully to avoid precipitancy and prejudice, and to comprise nothing more in my judgment than what was presented to my mind so clearly and distinctly as to exclude all ground of doubt. Descartes continued to publish works concerning both mathematics and philosophy for the rest of his life. In 1641 he published his metaphysics work, Meditationis de Prima Philosophia, written in Latin and thus addressed to the learned. It was followed, in 1644, by Principia Philosophia, a kind of synthesis of the discourse on the method and meditations on first philosophy. In 1643, Cartesian philosophy was condemned at the University of Utrecht, and Descartes was obliged to flee to The Hague. Descartes began a long correspondence with Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, devoted mainly to moral and psychological subjects. Connected with this correspondence, in 1649 he published Les Passions de l'Ame, that he dedicated to the princess. In 1647, he was awarded a pension by the Louis XIV, though it was never paid. A French translation of Principia Philosophia, prepared by Abbot Claude Picot, was published in 1647. This edition Descartes also dedicated to Princess Elizabeth. In the preface to the French edition, Descartes praised true philosophy as a means to attain wisdom. He identifies four ordinary sources to reach wisdom, and finally says that there is a fifth better and more secure, consisting in the search for first causes. Sweden Queen Christina of Sweden invited Descartes to her court in 1649 to organize a new scientific academy and tutor her in his ideas about love. She was interested in and stimulated Descartes to publish The Passions of the Soul, a work based on his correspondence with Princess Elizabeth. He was a guest at the house of Pierre Chanut, living on Vasterlangeton, less than 500 meters from Tre Krona in Stockholm. There, Chanut and Descartes made observations with a Torricellian barometer, a tube with mercury. Challenging Blaise Pascal, Descartes took the first set of barometric readings in Stockholm to see if atmospheric pressure could be used in forecasting the weather. Descartes apparently started giving lessons to Queen Christina after her birthday, 3 times a week, at 5 a.m. in her cold and drafty castle. Soon it became clear they did not like each other. She did not like his mechanical philosophy, nor did he appreciate her interest in ancient Greek. By the 15th of January 1650, Descartes had seen Christina only 4 or 5 times. On the 1st of February he caught a cold which quickly turned into a serious respiratory infection, and he died on the 11th of February. The cause of death was pneumonia according to Chanut, but peripneumonia according to the Dr. Van Wellen, who was not allowed to bleed him, which was harsh as described by Descartes himself. This remark was probably intended to be as much Descartes' take on the intellectual climate as it was about the weather. In 1996 E. Pies, a German scholar, published a book questioning this account, based on a letter by Johann van Wellen, who had been sent by Christina to treat him, something Descartes refused, and more arguments against its veracity have been raised since. Descartes might have been assassinated as he asked for an emetic, wine mixed with tobacco. As a Catholic in a Protestant nation, he was interred in a graveyard used mainly for orphans in Adolf Fredriks Kirke in Stockholm. His manuscripts came into the possession of Claude Clerslier, Harnet's brother-in-law, and a devout Catholic who has begun the process of turning Descartes into a saint by cutting, adding and publishing his letters selectively. In 1663, the Pope placed his works on the Index of Prohibited Books. In 1666 his remains were taken to France and buried in the Saint-Étienne-du-Mont. In 1671 Louis XIV prohibited all the lectures in Cartesianism, although the National Convention in 1792 had planned to transfer his remains to the Pantheon. He was reburied in the Abbey of Saint-Germain-des-Prés-Écoutes in 1819, missing a finger and the skull.